I'll see you guys in the dark.
I'm a 21-year-old male. It was July 4th of 2019. I live in Kansas in the USA. At the time, I worked as a corrections officer at a maximum security prison on the night shift. The cell house I was in charge of was the maximum general population, 1 man to each cell. This is where murderers, rapists, and overall the worst of society were housed. Before work, I was doing the typical American 4th of July thing. Grilling, blowing up fireworks, had a beer or two, having a great time with my now wife and family. My wife kept telling me I needed to just call in sick and take the day without pay. I said no, because we were a little behind on the bills. I really wish I had listened to her now. As the night went on, it came time for us to leave my mom's, and for me to go home and get ready for work. I took my wife home, dropped her off, got ready, and left for work. My wife's car was broke down, so she was stuck at home for the night. As I drove to work, which was about an hour drive away, I watched the fireworks going off all around me. It was sad. I had never had to work on the 4th of July before. After I got to work and got all of my equipment, I got into the cell house. Business as usual. Inmates were showered and locked up. I got my night cleaning crew out so they could clean the rest of the cell house, and met up with my partner for the night in the officer station to get our briefing from the last shift. Fast forward an hour into my shift. So it's now around 12:30 a.m. Another officer came into the cell house. So now there was 3 of us. This happened often on night shift, as there was nothing to do except rounds every half hour or so. Out of nowhere, we hear an inmate laughing like a witch, like a cackle. That was strange, but nothing to be alarmed with. Drugs were a bad problem in that facility. Still, as far as I know, eventually, after a few more cackles, I decided to go see who was making the sound, in case they were high or something. I walked through and checked all 200 inmates. Nothing. There were a small few that were even awake, so I brushed it off and just went back to my office. My partner and the other officer were asking if there was anyone that needed their cell searched. I couldn't think of anyone in particular. So I went and checked all the cells once again to see if I could get a whiff of smoke or see something. As I was walking on the 2nd-story cell, I found an inmate that was acting pretty weird. He was in his bed facing the wall, talking. This was also common as there were a lot of inmates with minor mental issues. I figured he was high because he turned and looked at me and told me to go fuck off. I was going to leave him alone, but the disrespect made me change my mind. The time is now 12:40 a.m., July 5th. I walked back to the office and tell the other 2 officers which cell he was in, and I wanted him searched. Cell 218. So how the cell house is laid out is there are 100 cells per level. From the officer station, you can see the north side, the 1st and 2nd floor. But you can't see the south side unless you walk the 50 feet over to it. Picture the movie Shawshank Redemption type cell houses. Except instead of being able to look through and see cells across, you just see a wall. The cells are back to back. As the officers go to pull him out of his cell to search it, I went to the ground floor and was watching from below. Reason why? I wanted to get the inmate on the ground level and not the 2nd floor. All that was there for protection from going over the edge was a handrail. I noticed the inmate was taking forever to get out of his cell. He came out in shorts and a do-rag, which is weird because he wasn't fully clothed. Didn't even put sandals on, just shorts and a do-rag. Yet took 5 minutes to get out of that cell. That made me pretty nervous. The inmate was a 6-foot tall, 250-pound muscle-bound dude. Definitely had size on all of us. So from the ground, I holler up and tell him to come down to the ground, and that he could use the phone or check his email or commissary. He declined my offer, which never happens. I knew something was up. He was watching them search his cell from the control panel box. This was pretty alarming. They were in his cell. I was on the ground. He could have easily ambushed all of them. He could have made it to them before I could get up the stairs. So to try to keep them safe, I went upstairs to the inmate. He was standing in the corner away against the handrails at the top of the stairs. He knew I was the OIC, which is the officer in charge of that cell house, and he knew I was the one that saw him talking to himself. He asked me why I was having his cell searched. I lied and said, "It's nothing personal, man. I have a quota I have to fill for cell searches in a night, and you were just awake, so I chose to have you searched. It'll just take a second, I promise." He was uneasy, pacing around. Something wasn't right. Then I saw it. He had turned just right, and I saw on his do-rag the Samsung logo reflecting the cell house light. Shit. I knew there was going to be a problem as soon as I saw it. He had a cell phone. I called over the radio for 2 additional officers to come to me. The inmate didn't seem to notice I made the call. My supervisors responded, saying 2 of them were on their way. At this time, only segregation officers had protective vests, so out of the 5 of us, there was only 1. I was not that one. The officers were name-changed: South, who had the vest, McCormick, Collins, Sheffield, and me. The time is now 12:58 a.m. As soon as South and McCormick got up to me, I told the inmate to turn around and cuff up. South and McCormick were on the inmate's right side. I was in front of him. "Why?" he angrily asked me. I refused to give him a reason at first. After a few minutes, I had enough. I told him, "Look, man, I can see the cell phone in your do-rag. You know you're not supposed to have that." The inmate then gets a defeated look on his face, but fire in his eyes. His body relaxes, and he slowly reaches up to retrieve the phone. But does he pull out the phone? No, he pulls out a 6-inch sharp metal rod with ripped fabric wrapped around the bottom of a handle. Everything froze for me. I knew I was going to die. Everything starts moving again. I now have an inmate twice my size, charging me, thrusting quickly, and repeatedly towards me. "Oh shit," was all I managed to yell. I immediately went into defensive mode, trying to grab his arm and disarm him. His wrist kept slipping, and I couldn't keep a hold of it, but at least I managed to block his attempts at my lower abdomen. Suddenly he aimed high and went for my chest. I felt it make contact. I had just been stabbed in the right part of my chest. "Spray him!" I yelled at the top of my lungs. McCormick was already working on spraying the MK9 OC spray. For my military readers, you know what I mean. For others, MK9 means a pressurized spray bottle about 20 fluid ounces. You can buy it at camping stores in the USA. It's called bear spray. It's the stuff that you spray in bears' eyes so that you can get away. South had come up behind the inmate and grabbed him around his chest and pulled him backwards right as McCormick sprayed. I didn't realize it at the time, but the spray hit me, the inmate and South, as well as everyone near us. I was able to turn and run. I ran around the stairs railing, past the panel box, and out onto the run of cells on the 2nd story. I ran past a few cells and turned around to see he wasn't chasing me, but South was wrestling him to the ground while gagging on the OC, as was I and McCormick. Sheffield, having heard the commotion, came running around the cell, saw what was happening, and ran in to help. The inmate grabbed South by the vest and tried to go through him and put him over the landing, but South had dropped to his knees before he went over. I grabbed my shoulder mic and screamed into it, "Level A response to Charlie 2, now!" Dispatch said something back, but I didn't hear it. I started to charge back to help save South. Before I could get away from the cell, I was in front of Collins, who grabbed me from behind and told me not to go. Due to the layout of the runs, I didn't see, but Sheffield grabbed the inmate from behind and body slammed him on his face. Began cuffing him. Sheffield got covered in OC as well, due to the inmates being covered in it. As soon as Colin let me go, I stood still and watched. Up the stairs came 4 more officers, the captain and a lieutenant. The lieutenant came and asked me what had happened. I started to explain, but he cut me off after he saw blood coming out of my left arm. After taking me out of the cell house, he made me lift my shirt because he saw the blood. He examined all of my wounds. He had me remove all of my equipment and hold paper towels to my arm. I was rushed to the ER. I was able to grab my phone out of my rental car. Had totaled my car a few weeks prior by hitting a deer. I called my wife and told her what had happened. She called my parents and my siblings. Luckily, my injuries weren't too bad. I was stabbed 4 times, once on my left arm just below the elbow. That was a through and through. Blade went in one side and went on the other. Twice in the top of my left hand. and the one that hit my chest went in the skin and hit one of my ribs, keeping it out of my lungs. Out of 37 plunges, I think it's safe to say I'm lucky to be here writing this story. I didn't sleep for 2 days following the event. I still have nightmares almost daily. I'm always paranoid. I openly carry a gun now. After my attack, I was forced to resign for safety reasons. Everyone statewide that works in maximum security prisons now has a vest. None of the people from there talk to me anymore. I feel abandoned. I have one guy from that facility that I still see, my sergeant, who wasn't there that night. Court is coming soon to add 3 more attempted murder charges on the guy. Turns out he was a shot caller for the Crips gang. To the fucker that stabbed me, I hope for your sake that we never meet again, aside from court, because I have a hollow point with your name scratched into it. I tell this story to a lot of people because of how bizarre it is. Here is some background. This took place in 2007. I know that because I was in 4th grade, and I was 9 at the time. We live in a large neighborhood, and at that time it was surrounded by farmland. My house is a 1-story house. When you stand in the doorway of my room, you can see the front door. The kitchen on the left, and my brother's room is straight ahead. Turning your head to the left, you can see the living room and my parents' room. You can get from my parents' room to the front door in less than a minute. For a while, we had been getting calls from jail. We had a home phone that had a caller ID. 3 times a day for a week, our phone would call, and the caller ID would say jail. We had no relation to jail at all. No police came to my house. Nothing. We never answered. My mom always said that if they don't leave a voicemail, then it isn't important. They never left one, so we didn't answer it. They always seemed to call in the morning, afternoon, and the evening. Well, one day we only got 1 call. We thought that was weird, but we didn't care. That night I was in my bed playing quietly because of my sister. She was an infant at the time. She was sleeping in my room. I remember playing with my Madeline doll, and I decided to go to bed. It was around 9 to 10 p.m. at the time. When I put my head on the pillow, the doorbell rang. Well, this was the first time my dad would be getting home, so I thought it was my dad playing with me. The doorbell rang again, and again, and again. I got scared, clutched my doll, and ran to my mom's room. She was awake and watching TV. I told her someone was ringing the doorbell. She paused the TV, and the doorbell rang. Just kept ringing. She immediately got my brother and my sister. The ringing stopped. She looked through the peephole and saw a black figure of some sorts, but couldn't make it out. She did mention she didn't know if it was a person or something else. She was too afraid to turn the porch light on. We went back to her room, and the ringing continued, and then knocking. It didn't sound like someone was trying to break in. It sounded like casual ringing and knocking. But it just kept going. Then it went faster and more intense. I got scared and cried. "Mommy, make it stop! Make it stop!" My mom called my dad to get home now. He was 30 minutes away, and we endured intense ringing and knocking for what seemed like an eternity. The longer we waited, the more vicious it sounded. Then it stops. We sat in silence with the only light on being the TV. When the garage opened, my mom had this sense of fear in her eyes as the garage went up. We held on to my infant sister tightly, braced herself to protect us. And it was my dad. "I told you to tell me when you arrived." My dad didn't see anything. His lights were on when he pulled into our street, but he drove slowly. He saw no car driving past him or anyone. My brother and I started to head back to our rooms when the ringing started. We froze. The ringing and knocking continued viciously, and my dad ran towards the front door and swung it open. No one was there. Nothing. My dad ran around the house. Nothing. The calls from the jail stopped. We keep our porch light on now, and whenever the doorbell rings, I do get nervous and keep quiet. I'm afraid that one day it might happen again. We did build our house, and we still live in it, so it is impossible that someone could have lived there before us. We also never called the police because my mom thought that they wouldn't take me seriously over someone ringing the doorbell and knocking on our door. We installed Ring a year ago, and I don't really have fear of the doorbell ringing anymore. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.